Hey everyone, and welcome back to Daily Tuition. In this video, we are going to learn how to create these nested routes with Next 13. We're going to understand how to update Next application from 12 to 13 version and make this beautiful nested layout with TailwindCSS. So let me just first set up Next.js 12 version and then upgrade that with Next.js 13. So I'm going to open my VS Code and here I'm going to open my terminal. Inside this terminal, I'm going to execute a command called npx create next app, then specify --js because we are using JavaScript, --ESLint, and then we specify the name of the project. So we specify here name, next, latest, app. Now that's upon you, you can specify any name to this project. This is going to create a new folder inside this VS Code. So enter into the project directory first. So cd into latest app. Inside this Next.js 12, we have this page folder. And inside this page folder, we're going to have all the routes of this project. But in Next 13, we can create the app directory and create all the server components and create another route section of the project. Next.js 13 introduced a new file system-based routing built on top of React server component with the support for layout, nested routing, loading states, error handling, and more. We can do that with the app directory. Now let me show you how you can upgrade this version to Next.js 13. So you have to open your terminal, enter into your project directory, and here you have to say npm I for install, and you have to upgrade the next package. So specify here next @latest. Then you also need to update React. So we pass React latest, and you also need to update React DOM. So we pass here React DOM latest. And just after that, you also need to update the ESLint. So we call ESLint config.next. We also need the latest version of this package. So we call here latest. When I press enter, this is going to install and update all these packages. So if you can notice here in the package.json, this will update all these packages. You can notice. And now, if you back to the package.json, then you'll notice here we have the Next 13 version. We have the Next 13. Now we can use the app directory inside this project. So select the project, and in the root directory, we create the app directory. The app directory works alongside the pages directory and allow for incremental adoption. This allows you to opt some routes of your application into a new behavior while keeping other routes in the page directory for previous behavior. Routes across directories should not resolve to the same URL path and will cause a build time error to prevent a conflict. By default, components inside this app directory are React server component. However, you can also use client components inside this app directory as well. This app directory is just like the pages directory. The folders are used to define routes. A route is a single path of nested folders, following the hierarchy from the root folder down to the final leaf folder. Files are used to create UI that is shown for the route segment. To create nested routes, you can nest folders inside each other. Now inside this app, Next.js provide a set of special files that can use in your routes. So inside this app, we are going to create two files. First is page.js. This represents the UI of this route. And we're also going to create a file called layout. So we call here layout.js. Now keep in mind, these are the special files of the Next.js application. So it means Next.js will automatically identify these files and use it. You don't have to change the name of these files, otherwise Next.js won't recognize it. So page is used to specify the default UI for this app route, and a layout file is used to define a UI that is shared across multiple pages. A layout accepts another layout or a page as its child. You can nest layouts to create nested routes. So now inside this page, let me first create a simple function. So we say export default function. The function name is page. Now that's upon you, you can specify any name to this function. So we specify here name root page. And then inside it, I'm going to say return. And in the h1 heading tag, I'm simply going to say hello Next.js app folder root route. Now this page is a default UI file in the app directory. Just like the page index.js. Just like this file. When you start the development server of Next.js, you will have this index.js as a default file. The same way, app use page.js file. Now let me save the changes and show you the result first. And I'm going to say npm run dev to start the development server. If I start the development server, then you will notice here, if I open this localhost 3000, it's going to open the pages index.js file. This is because we didn't initialize this app folder. So once you create this app folder and create both these files inside it, you need to inform Next.js 13 that we are using the app directory inside a project, because Next 13 is in the experimental phase. To make your application work, you need to add a property inside the nextconfig.js file. So open the nextconfig.js, right down here. You have to add a property called experimental, and in the object, you have to specify app directory is going to be true. So you have to tell Next.js 13 that we are using app directory inside this project. So we call this statement, save the changes, and then you have to restart your development server. So we're going to stop the development server and restart it. Now, when I restart the development server, you're going to get an error message. Conflict app and page file was found. What you have to do is you have to delete the index.js file or the page.js file from these folders. Now, because we are using the app directory, I'm going to delete this index.js file. So let me select this and delete it. Once I delete it, let me just restart the server again. There we go. Now the server is started successfully. Now if you try to execute your application, then you won't get anything. If you open inspect tool, then inside this body, you can notice you don't have anything here. And inside the console, you will get an error message. This is because you have to create layout to your application so you can import all your components inside it. So let me just close this config file, and inside this layout, let me just specify layout to my application. I'm simply going to say export default function. The function name is root layout, and this is going to destructure children from the component. So I'm going to say here return, and here I'm going to call HTML, and here I'm going to call a body, and inside this body I'm going to specify all the children. So we call here children, something like back to the project and reload it. You can see now I'm going to have hello Next.js app folder root route. Now you can use the same layout to all the components. Now let me set up TailwindCSS. So let me just open the tailwindcss.com, and here I'm going to install TailwindCSS. So let me just install TailwindCSS, post CSS, and auto prefixer. Once we have that, execute a command called npx tailwindcss-p. So I'm going to execute npx tailwindcss init-p. So this is going to create post CSS and tailwind config file inside the project. Just for that, once you have this, let me copy all these three statements and specify that inside the tailwind config file right here. Just for that, just copy, open the styles. Inside the styles, we have globals.css. Get rid of all this code. We are not using it. Specify tailwind directives here. Scroll down, and here we have the h1 heading tag. Let me copy it and specify that to this page right here. Now, if you back to your project, then you won't see any changes to your h1 heading tag. This is because I don't have this global.css file imported anywhere in this project. So at the top, inside this layout, right up here, I'm going to create a simple command and say import tailwind CSS. In the single quote, we specify double dot /, then specify the styles folder, and inside that, we have global.css file. We're going to have the styling of Tailwind CSS to this h1 heading tag. Now, let me just add a font family right up here. So inside this global.css at the top, let me add a font family. So I'm going to import the URL here, and right down here, I'm going to say star and select all the descendant div elements and then specify font family to it. So I'm going to grab this import statement from the Google font and specify that font to all my elements. Save the changes, back to the project, and you can see I'm going to have this font family to this text. Let's understand how to create nested routes. In the Next.js application, we're also going to have a special file called head. So to specify title to your application, you can call a file head.js, and inside this file, you can simply export default function with the name head. And right from this function, you have to return. You are going to return a title, nested app. And if you want, you can add here a link tag and add your icon here. So head is used to specify title to your page. So you can notice here at the top we have a title of this page, nested app. So for that, let me close all these files and let's create a nested route. So what we are going to do is we're going to create footer, header, main, and sidebar folders. So each folder represent a new route. So inside this app here, we first create footer, and inside this app again we create header. Inside this app we create main, and at the last we create sidebar. Now each folder represent a new route. So it means if we are on the root route, so let's suppose we are on the localhost 3000, then this 3000 is represent the app directory. Then if you want to access the footer route, you have to specify localhost 3000 footer, and this is going to represent the footer directory, and so on. So if you try to access the footer, if I say here footer, then you won't get anything. You'll get 404, the page could not be found. This is because we don't have any file or the default UI inside this footer. So let's create a default UI inside this footer. If I create here a file called page.js, if I copy and paste the footer component, something like this, reload the browser, then you'll notice I'm going to have the footer to this footer route. And I'm going to do the same for the header as well. So I'm going to create here a page.js, and right inside this page, I'm going to paste the component. Right inside this component, you can notice I'm going to first import a link component from next link, and then use that right inside this header. In Next.js 13, we have two ways to navigate between routes, using link or using use route. For this example, we're going to stick with this link component. So we import link component, create a function, and inside that we have a header with some Tailwind classes and the link component, and this refers to the home route. So we specify here href, specify the home route, and specify some classes to it. And the text is going to be navigation menu. Back to the project and reload it. You won't get anything, but if you back to the header, if you open the header route, you can see you're going to have your header here. So when you open the footer, you're going to get your footer. When you open your header, you're going to have your header here. Now just out of that, let me close these files and create a sidebar. So inside the sidebar, let me just create page.js, and inside this, I'm going to copy this page and specify that right here. Let me just change a few things here. Instead of header, I'm going to specify aside and then specify some Tailwind classes here. So I'm going to copy and paste some Tailwind classes here. Just like that, inside this aside, I'm going to put a link tag with the text main with sidebar. And now if I open the sidebar, if I open here sidebar, you'll notice I'm going to have my sidebar here. Now, just like that, let me assemble all these components and create a main page of this application. So instead of this text, let me just print all these components and create a nested layout inside this application. So I'm simply going to first open the layout.js file of this app folder, and just for that, right up here, I'm going to import header from /header file. Inside the header, we have page. So I'm going to import my page right here and import from footer page.js. And I'm going to import this right inside this layout, inside this root layout. So right here, inside this body here, I'm going to add a division tag. And to this div, let me specify some classes. So let me just add here first a comment and say app components. And right down here inside these classes, I'm going to call container mx auto to center it, padding by 10 to specify top and bottom padding. And then I'm going to specify flex column, and gap. Gap is going to be 4. And inside this div, I'm going to add my header first. So we first add here a header. And after this header, we're going to have my children's. So we call here a children. And after that, we have the footer. So this is the structure of this main page. You can see I'm going to have the structure of this page something like this. At the top, we have the navigation menu. At the center, we have the main page. And just after that, we have the footer. Now let's back to the app page right here, and let's create this main application page. So what I'm going to do is at the top, let me first import a link component from next link, get rid of this return statement, and here I'm going to return a division tag and specify some Tailwind classes here. So we call here grid calls 1, then call gap 2, and then I'm going to specify h hyphen, and then specify value to the division tag. So we specify 700 pixel height to this div. Just out of that, inside this div, we're going to have another div with some Tailwind classes. So we specify here bg sky 500, justify center, and items center. This will center all the content. And after that, here we have the main component. And to this main component, I'm going to specify class name, text center. And inside this main, here we have h1 heading tag with the text homepage component. And to this h1 heading tag, let me specify some classes, text 3xl, and then specify text slate 200. Just out of that, inside this main, we call the link component and then specify href attribute, which is going to be the main route. So we're going to redirect the user to the main route when the user click on this link. And just out of that, we specify some class names here and then specify here text main component. And you can see you're going to have the project something like this. So this is the main page of this application. When the user click on this main component, it's going to navigate you to the main route. Right now, I don't have any default file to this main route, so it's not going to display anything. So I'm going to back to my root route. I'm going to open the main folder, and right here, I'm going to create page.js file. I'm going to simply first create and say export default function. The function name is page. That's upon you. You can specify any name to this function. And right from this function, I'm going to return some Tailwind classes. So I'm going to say grade call 6. I'm going to create 6 columns inside this div, then specify some gap to it and specify height to it. And just out of that, right here, I'm going to create my first column. So we call here a div with the class name call span 2. I'm going to specify 2 column space to this division tag using this class. And right inside this, I'm going to call the sidebar. So at the top, right up here, I'm going to say import sidebar from single quote dot /sidebar /page. And I'm going to call this sidebar right here. And just after that, here I'm going to call another div. I'm going to call some Tailwind classes here like this. And inside that, I'm going to call my main tag. So we call here main and specify some class name. So we call here class name grade calls 2. And here we call the nested components. It changes. And now if I click on this main link, oops, I think I misspelled something here. Import sidebar. Oops, I need to specify here dot again. There the changes, and you can see you're going to have the result something like this. We have the main navigation menu, then we have the sidebar, and then we have the main content. When you click on this main with sidebar, this will open the main tag. If you're back to the root route, you're just going to have the main component. And when you click on this main component with sidebar, this will open the main route. And in the main route, we have the sidebar with the main component. Then we have the navigation menu and the footer. Now inside this main component, I'm going to create the nested routes. So inside this main folder, I'm going to create 2 routes. So I'm going to create a new folder with the name analytics, and I'm also going to create a folder called settings. In the analytics, we create page file. So we call page.js, and in the setting, we're also going to create a file called page.js. Now inside this setting page.js, I'm going to paste a function with a division tag, and to this div we specify border, text center, and specify the background color, specify some height and margin. Inside that we have another div with flex, justify center, item center, and specify the full width. And inside that we have a division tag, and then we have the h1 heading tag with the text analytics component. and then we specify a link component with the href attribute main analytics. Now, save the changes. Let me copy this page, open the setting page, and paste this function. And instead of analytics, now I'm going to say settings component, and do the same right here as well. I'm going to say settings. Save the changes. And now at the end, at the top, don't forget to import a link from next link, and do the same inside this analytics page as well, right up here. Save this file, open the browser, and if you type here analytics and search for it, you can see you're going to have your analytics component. And you can do the same for settings as well. If you have your settings, then you're going to have your settings component. Now what I want this analytics and this setting components inside this main component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to back to the main component. So I'm going to open the main page.js file, and right here inside of this nested, I'm going to import both these components. So right up here, I'm going to say import analytics from dot / specify analytics and page, and do the same for the settings as well. So we call here settings from dot / specify settings and call page file. And let me copy and specify both this component right here. So I'm going to import both these components inside this main section. Back to the project, and you can see I'm going to have my nested layout. You're just going to have your main component. If you open the main route, you're going to have sidebar with the main section. If you open the analytics, it will just going to print the analytics component. And if you open the settings, it's just going to print the settings component. Now, once you understand how you can nest a component, let me show you how you can add a sidebar to the setting page. So if you open the setting component, then you'll notice we're just going to have the setting component here. Let me change this text. Let me just back to the settings page. Let me change this to settings and change this analytics to settings, and open the settings page. And now let me add a sidebar inside the settings page. So instead of adding sidebar inside this page, you can create a layout file. So here you can create layout.js, and inside this file, if you import sidebar from // then specify sidebar page, and if you say here export a default function sidebar layout with children's, something like this, then from here you can simply return a division tag, and with this div you can return some Tailwind classes. So if I return some Tailwind classes right from here and create another div with the sidebar, something like this, and then after that I'm going to create another div with the call span 4, and inside that if I call all the children's back to the project, then you'll notice inside the setting page we're going to have the sidebar. So using this layout, you can nest and specify layout of your component. Now, Next.js 13 also introduced a suspense component. Suspense component is a React component that displays a fallback until its children have finished loading. So the suspense component is useful when the component takes some time to load. Let's see how to do it inside a sidebar. I'm going to create a new file called loading. Just out of that, here I'm going to say export default function. The function name is loading, and inside this I'm going to say return, and then I'm simply going to return h2 heading tag with the text sidebar is loading. Just out of that, if you back to your project and reload it, you won't see any effect. So what you have to do is you have to add some delay to this sidebar execution. So to do that, I'm going to create another file here called delay.js. Now that's upon you. You can specify any name to this file. Inside this file, I'm going to create a constant variable delay is equal to, then I'm going to call here delay millisecond. And from this promise, I'm just going to say resolve and return resolve result. So we call here resolve set timeout. We are going to call here a function of JavaScript, which is set timeout. And here we call resolve. And inside this, we call resolve and the delay millisecond, this parameter. And just out of that, right down here, I'm going to export default async function delay component. And here I'm going to say await delay, and specify the millisecond, which is 3000. And then I'm going to return a simple h4 heading tag with the text display delay component. Save the changes. Back to the sidebar page right here, and at the top, right up here, you have to import Suspense from the React. And just out of that, right down here, you have to import delay component, and you have to import the loading component. So inside this aside right here, you first call the suspense component, and you specify the fallback value to the suspense. So the fallback value of the suspense is equal to the loading component. So we call this loading right here. And inside this, I'm going to add a div with h1 heading tag, and then I'm going to print some text here like this. After that, don't forget to call this delay component. So we call here delay component, and then call this link component. So we cut this link and specify that right here. That's it. Loading status is now ready. You can see we're going to have here a message, sidebar is loading. And after 3 seconds, we're going to have the sidebar. So whenever we restart the application, we are going to have this loading message here. And we are going to do the same for all the components of this Next.js application. So let's suppose that you want to do the same thing with this analytics component. You want to display a loading message to this analytics when you restart your application. You can create a new component inside this analytics, or you can reuse this loading and this delay component. So what I can do is I'm going to back to the page right up here. I'm going to say import suspense from React, and then I'm going to import delay component and import loading component from the sidebar. And inside this div right here, before this div right up here, I'm going to say suspense. I'm going to call a suspense component like this. To the suspense, we need to first specify the fallback value. So we first specify here loading like this, and then inside this, I'm going to call this division tag just like this. Just out of that, just before this link or after this link, that's upon you, you can call the delay component, this one. That's it. Reload the browser. You can see you're going to have the same result for the analytics. That's it. I hope you understand how to work with nested layout in Next.js 13. If you find anything useful, make sure to press the like button, share this video with your friends, subscribe for more latest videos. That is all for now. I will see you in the next one.